Well, hello. Today's video is going to be something that I have wanted to talk about for many weeks now, but just never got around to it for various reasons. But anyways, we are here now and that's all that matters. Today I'm just going to be having a chill discussion with myself. I mean, technically you guys, but myself right now, about the healers in general. It's going to be kind of a critique, kind of just me sharing my opinions about everything since Mod 19, and also a little bit of me sharing a couple of references to a conversation I had with one of the devs, Astrodol, the other week. I think it was about 2 weeks ago now. It was a very good conversation, and it helped me kind of understand a little bit more of the reasoning behind certain changes, and I think that is something that the majority of you will benefit from knowing as well, so hopefully you find it at least a little bit interesting. So first of all, everybody's number one complaint about the healing since Mod 19 has been how the marking system works, and it has been a matter of frustration for myself as well, especially when I'm trying to move the mark around or I accidentally mark somebody and I didn't mean to and I want to get it back on the person that I want to have marked. The whole actually applying the mark is probably the most annoying part of the whole thing. The mark itself I think is cool, but just the execution of it I think could use a lot of improvement. For a couple of reasons. One, just, applying the mark, and the other part being seeing the mark, because seeing it is, I want to say it's even more annoying than applying it, and both of them are pretty annoying. So the first thing I want to address is that's actually not an opinion, it's a fact, is why the mark is not visible, why it hides behind the health bar. And it hides behind the health bar because it's a different type of effect from the health bar itself. So basically, the actual healing mark, the wings or the fidget spinner thing that goes above people's heads, it's a visual effect and it's not part of the HUD in the world, so the two things don't interact, and so the actual healing mark doesn't know that it's behind a health bar for it to move. It doesn't understand that because they're not connected in any way. And that's the first thing that I think could be fixed, and my suggestion for this was, in order to make it more visible, just have it as a HUD element, like on the actual screen that you can move around. My suggestion was to have it look pretty similar to the companion health bar, how you have that little hand and then the health and then the name of your companion or whatever. Instead of that, just have it be the mark symbol for whatever class you're playing, and then the person you have marked's class symbol, really tiny, and then their name and then their health bar, and then you can move that wherever you want on the screen, because I think that would make it a lot easier to just instantly know who you have marked and what their health is, instead of trying to look up at your party pane or trying to find them wherever they may be in the world. It would be even more helpful in 10-person content because, as we all know, we can't see the opposite party on the screen anywhere other than, their characters actually being on the screen. But there's no reference for their health or anything like that like we have for our own party. On the left, it only shows the 5 people in your party. So having that for your marked person, if they are not in the same party as you, even if they are, but especially if they're not, I think would make things a lot easier. The recent changes to the healing mark, if you weren't aware of them, I think helped out the situation with applying the mark a lot, but it still is pretty annoying. So now the mark's not going to fall off if the person goes farther than 100 feet away from you, and then the range has been increased from 100 to 120 that you can apply it from and heal from. And I think that's good, but the most important part of that whole thing is that the mark doesn't fall off. So if I accidentally go AFK at a campfire and then the team runs up like 80 miles ahead without me, I don't have to try and mark them real quick whenever I get back. It will always still be there. I won't have to worry about it. I still actually find myself always trying to triple check that I have the right person marked all the time, even though I know the mark's not going to fall off. And they also fixed a lot of issues where it would disappear too, which I think is great. But just the act of applying it itself, I found it most frustrating probably on Paladin for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'll have to tab on the same person like 2, 3, 4 times before the mark actually goes on them sometimes. And in that time that I'm trying to mark them, they take a lot more damage or die, and that just kind of sucks, I think. Well, I don't think, I know it sucks. And then, like I already said, it doesn't help that you can't really see the mark if you're a certain distance away unless you angle the camera just right. So that makes it even more frustrating, and I just think that overall the mark system could be a lot better. One of the suggestions I had was to have tabs cycle through the members of your party whenever you're not aiming directly at someone. That way that even if you can't get them in your direct line of sight or can't get the mark off, you could just tab a few times and it will eventually get to the right person, maybe even faster than if you actually tried to mark them yourself. Also, one thing I just want to point out in general, it's not really related to my opinion, is that the mark was originally intended to be used to keep the tank full healed. It was not really intended to be moved around from person to person in order to just spot heal, I guess. Which kind of makes sense because tanks have significantly more HP than everyone else, and so healing them would take a lot more effort than healing a DPS, for example. So having the mark on the tank and being able to tab heal them with a very strong heal is really nice. I like the mechanic of it in general. For Cleric and Warlock, Paladins, tab just feels bad, but I will get to that eventually because I'll get to Paladin eventually, you know? And going back to targeting and actually marking the people, it's going to be even harder on console. I should say it is even harder on console because it's actually out now on console. And I kind of feel bad for the people who have to try and use a controller to mark people who are moving around because, I don't know. I mean, I don't own a console, but I've always been really bad with controllers, so, I mean, I guess it kind of sucks from what I've been hearing. Another thing I've been seeing a lot of is people just questioning why the healing changes were necessary to begin with. And I mean, if you look at Paladin before mod 19, I think it was mod 19, maybe it was mod 18. It was definitely mod 19, I'm crazy. Paladins were extremely overpowered, very strong, and that was something that definitely needed to change. And then you had healing in general, where you could just spam one button and an AoE heal and keep everyone alive at the same time, and that required very little paying attention, very little skill, and very little engagement also. But one of the biggest influences for the changes in general was the desire to have players participate more in the mechanics instead of just ignoring everything because they knew they would be able to get healed from it because healing was so strong. We, in general, as players, are really conditioned to being able to ignore things because of how Neverwinter has been pretty much forever almost. We've always been able to ignore mechanics or stand in red zones and be like, I'll only take a little bit of damage, it's fine. And as a result of that, there's a lot of people who just ignore red zones entirely or never bothered to learn mechanics in dungeons. And so you get a lot of people who just don't know how it works, and then they end up dying, and then they get mad because they weren't healed, and blah blah blah. But for the longest time in Neverwinter, you were either full health or you were dead. And so everyone's just conditioned to that, and that's what everybody's used to. So if the people actually did know the mechanics of a dungeon and respect them for whatever dungeon they're in, chances are they would be taking much less damage, and then healing would be a lot easier, and then staying alive would be a lot easier, and yeah, everything would be easy. Also, you can still ignore certain mechanics in red zones and stuff if you're overgeared for the content that you're running, but the problem with it was that it was just kind of the default thing to do, and that wasn't something that the devs really wanted the default thing to be. Like, they wanted people to actually use and respect the mechanics that they were creating, and so they had to make the healing changes to sort of make that happen. Now anyways, now that I'm done talking about that, and I'm going to talk about the things you actually want me to talk about, which is the stuff I'm complaining about. Because for some reason, my videos do so much better whenever I'm complaining and rather than when I'm actually, doing something neutral or saying positive things. I'm not entirely sure why, but people seem to feast on anger and frustration or something like that. But anyways, I'm going to go to Cleric last because I have very few gripes about Cleric, and we'll talk about Paladin first. Because Paladin is kind of an interesting case to me because on one hand they have shields, and that's pretty great. But whenever you're trying to heal a 5-person dungeon, it's pretty not so great. Because the actual healing magnitudes and healing numbers for Paladin are very low, and so it's a lot more difficult to keep somebody full health than it is with the other two classes. I just want to say that on Clerics, you have that feat that allows the cast time of your tab heal to be reduced significantly, and that it's really obvious that it's not there on Paladin. On Warlock, it's not so obvious because theirs is a heal over time and you start getting benefit from it almost immediately after you activate it. Same with Cleric when the feat's active. Even when it's not, if you just tab real quick, you'll still get a relatively decent sized heal that might top somebody off. But on Paladin, you just don't. I am a 26k Paladin right now. I've got like 160-ish power and 180 something crit right now. But in LOM, the Cocoon of Arcturia, even after the changes that extend the time before it explodes, if I don't crit with any of the heals on the person that's cocooned, I still occasionally can't heal them to full if they were low. And that's feels kind of bad, you know? And if Paladins had that cast time reduction on their feet, which I understand they want to manage the shield of it because the shield from that tab can be pretty large still. But if Paladins had that cast time reduction, it would be so much easier to be able to heal somebody to full, because Paladins have a severe lack of burst healing, except for their lay on hands daily, which I understand all the healers want to be different. Cleric has a ton of burst healing, Paladin has none, but they have shield and utility, and then Warlock is pretty much almost 100% heal over time. I mean, it's not really almost 100%. You've got Revitalize and the at-will heal. I think everything else, and Vampiric Embrace. Okay, they're like 60% heal over time. But anyway, this is getting off track again, which I'm really good at doing when I have these kinds of discussions, but what I'm trying to say is that the healing magnitudes for Paladins feel pretty low. The shields I'm not really concerned about. If they could separate healing and shielding magnitudes, that would add some level of complicatedness to it, but it would allow them to be able to heal for more, which I think would be nice. I don't think it needs to be increased significantly or anything, but I just think that it needs a little bit more attention because healing is really frustrating on Paladin right now. If I had to pick a least favorite healer right now, it would definitely be Paladin, just because of how I can't keep everyone alive with it often, especially in scaled content. Unscaled content's not so bad, but in scaled content, it's just not great. And when I voiced this concern to Astrodol, he said something that I knew, but I didn't really pay attention to, I guess. And that is that Paladins do have that shield, and while the shield is up, it's basically like they have that much more hit points. Which is fine until you think about, now that they have this shield, how am I going to be able to heal them without overriding the shield, without, I kind of wish Paladins had one of their AoE heals not apply a shield. I'm not saying to take it away from the two that already have it, Divine Shelter and Divine Touch, but I don't know, Cleansing Touch, if it did not apply a shield but had a little bit more magnitude and a cleanse on it, that would be cool, I think. Or if it applied to, more than one person, that would be even better. Basically, to sum it up, my frustration is just that Paladins have no heal over time, and that is completely fine, but their healing output is too low to keep up with what Clerics and Warlocks can do. And so, unless you're in a 10-man content where you have a second healer to keep up with that lack of healing, it's gonna feel pretty not very great. Now, Warlock is actually the one that had my longest list of concerns/complaints, but after the recent changes to them and their tab heal and stuff, it's actually felt a little bit better, but I am going to talk about what I liked about the changes that have happened. Number one being Soulstorm, of course, because you couldn't see it at all before, and I think it's actually a little bit larger than it was before, or at least the visual effects shows its actual radius instead of that tiny little circle that it was before. But my main concern with Warlock at the time was that their area heals were so tiny compared to Cleric and Paladin, because, Clerics have Healing Word that's an 80-foot radius, Paladins have Divine Shelter that is an 80-foot radius, but then you go to Warlock and you don't have any of that. You kind of have to plop your heals on the floor and hope that people stand in them, and people don't stand in them. At least in random queues, they don't. So that lack of large AoE heal was something I definitely felt early on, as well as the tab heal being crippled by the fact that you can't use it whenever it's busy. So if you use Warlock's Bargain to get some of your Soul Weave back, you can't use the tab heal for a few seconds. I think it's like 10 seconds or something like that. And then if you're using the Soul Reclamation feat to help you get more Soul Weave back, you can't use tab there either. And many times I've tried to tab heal someone after finally getting some Soul Weave back, and then it's just like, you can't do that right now, sorry. And then my person dies, and I'm just like, well, that doesn't feel so great. Although, now that I've actually had more experience with it, and healing a lot more with it recently, it is nice in the fact that it has a little bit different difficulty than Cleric and Paladin's tabs do. you have to pay attention to one more thing, which adds another layer of something different about Warlock than you have on Cleric and Paladin. Also talking about that, Clerics and Paladins both have an encounter that increases their divinity regen without sacrificing healing, but like I said, Warlock's Bargain prevents you from using that tab healing, so it's kind of locking you out a little bit. It does give you, I believe, the extra outgoing healing whenever you activate it to use for your other skills, but sometimes you just want that tab, you know? You gotta get that tab. And as a result, I've found myself not using Warlock's Bargain as often as I otherwise would, because, for Cleric and for Paladin, I'll use Divine Glow, I'll use Sacred Weapon as soon as it comes off cooldown if my divinity's not full to help me have as much as possible at all times. But I don't do that for Warlock because I kind of need that tab. So as a result, I end up running out of resource more easily on Warlock than the other two, which is a different source of frustration, but I think that one is kind of more of like a lack of skill than an actual problem. But my main concern with Warlocks is their class features feel pretty underwhelming and not very useful, in my opinion. The Soul Bond one is definitely useful, and there's a couple other ones that I can see their use for, like the one that gives you some soul... I don't remember what it does. It's the final one. Cleric and Paladin both have their own unique set of class features. So for example, Paladins, they have their auras that are active pretty much all the time as long as the conditions are met. Them being in range, for example, or you healing them, or whichever one you choose. Cleric have a lot of outgoing healing bonuses as their class features kind of thing, but Warlock doesn't seem to have their own unique set of class features that enhance the experience at all. So one of my suggestions was to have something that would increase the radius of Soulstorm, Pillar of Power, and Revitalize, but then have it be a trade-off to reduce your damage by 10% or whatever. That would help solve the problem of having a lack of larger AoEs on Warlock, and it would also give me an actual useful class feature to choose. Another suggestion I had was with Wraith's Shadow, because it's just not very useful right now at all. My suggestion was for it to act kind of like how Cleric's old Astral Seal used to work, for those of you who remember that. You put it on the target, and then people who attack the target get a little bit of heal over time type thing. It's kind of like lifesteal in a way, but not. And it would only last for the duration that the shadow is on the target. I think it would add to the heal over time thing that Warlocks have got going on, and I also think it would give them a little bit more versatility, a little bit more options with their healing encounters, because they only really have a few. And Vampiric Embrace is their cleanse, and it's very expensive, and the healing on that doesn't feel that great. I did try it out because for some reason I somehow missed the memo that it had a heal at all. So then I would try it out, and it just wasn't worth spending all that soul weave on, I think. So I end up using Pillar of Power, Warlock's Bargain, and then Soulstorm pretty much, and then my at-will heal, of course, and tap. And that's pretty much it. I would definitely look to swap out my Pillar of Power with Wraith's Shadow in different situations. I think that would be interesting. And also, speaking about Warlock had the largest amount of changes going into Mod 19, so the devs are paying pretty close attention to how it performs, and it's also really likely that they'll get more adjustments going forward just because they had the most amount of changes, so it's the most likely that things are going to need to get changed pretty much. So I am kind of excited for the things that they may or may not add in the future for that, or adjust or something like that, but I'm most concerned about Paladin just because, you know, like I said, Paladin just doesn't feel great at the moment, unless you're doing a trial. Warlock has been pretty much a roller coaster of feelings for me, because when it was first announced, it looked and felt great, then it got nerfed and it felt really bad, and then it felt a little bit better, and then kind of bad, and then now it feels good. But not quite there. It's just been a whole bunch of ups and downs with Warlock, and I think that that's just part of the life of development, I guess, but I'm relatively happy with how Warlock is right now. So I hope that they don't get any worse, again, because my little heart can't take it. Now, Clerics, I honestly don't really have any gripes about Cleric right now. I mean, I do have one thing to say, but I'm not going to say it, because if I say it, then it'll be my fault if something happens to change the thing that I was going to say. So I just won't say it. But I do want to talk about crit severity for a second, because there was a whole lot of confusion around that when the patch notes came out for that, or rather when the blog post was written for that everyone seemed to think that crit severity was capped at 50% for healing. And that's not true. It's the only thing that was changed was that the base crit severity for heals was reduced to 50%. You can still increase it at the same rate as you could before. The only reason that was changed is because critical healing was just too strong, but they didn't want to make base healing non-crits so weak, so they just reduced the strength of the critical heals to kind of make up for that. Honestly, I don't really notice it that much. Crits still feel good. Vorpal is still good, by the way, for healers. So don't toss your Vorpal in the trash can, because it's still good. I'm not sure if this video turned out the way I wanted it to, but it's out there on the internet now, so I mean, whatever. But overall, the devs are looking at ways to continue improving healing in Mod 19. A lot of this is stuff they wanted to do a long time ago, but just never really had the time or resources to get to it. And so I'm kind of interested / excited to see any future changes that they decide to make, specifically with marking, because I think that's kind of the biggest weakness for all 3 healers right now. And they do know that it's frustrating, by the way. I think I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. It doesn't feel like I did, but I went through this whole document I have, and I've been talking for 30 minutes, so I'm assuming I did. And it just happened and I wasn't paying attention, so I apologize if it was bad. The biggest takeaway from this is the why, and then my opinion, of course, because that's kind of what the whole video is. The why being that they just don't want people to ignore mechanics all the time, and they work to make these mechanics, and then if people just ignore them, then what's the point of even having them in the first place, right? That was one of the biggest influences for the changes in the first place. Which honestly, I think that if more people understood the why of certain things, that there would be more of a positive reception to changes in general. Because a lot of times you just get the patch notes and then you're like, X, Y, Z were changed, and everyone's like, why? It was fine before, blah, blah, blah. I hate it. But then if alongside the patch notes, there were like developer notes where the devs kind of explained a little bit about the reasoning behind certain changes, I think people would be more receptive to changes as a whole. And that's just a general suggestion for patch notes. I don't really know what it is, but it feels like I talked about nothing the whole time. I hope you guys got some takeaway from this video, because I didn't get any takeaway from making it. But anyways, that's all I have for you today, I believe. But one last thing before I go, I created a chat channel right before I started recording this video. So there's no one in it right now. But it's called TTM, and it stands for Tom, Tick, and More, because I personally would like a chat channel that's actually good to find Tom groups, because right now there's really not one. There is one, but I've heard from several people that I just shouldn't join because it's not worth it and it's toxic in there and all that nonsense. So I decided to make my own. Whenever there's nothing around that suits your expectations, just make something yourself, right? So if you are interested in joining my chat channel, it is for finding groups for Tower of the Mad Mage, the Infernal Citadel, and then any content beyond that. I don't want to say Zariel because I haven't even done Zariel, and I can't make a channel advertising Zariel when I haven't even done it. But eventually, when I get there, you know, it will be for that. But the only requirement to join is that you have to understand the Tom mechanics. You don't necessarily have to have completed it, but it's preferred if you have, of course. So if you do want to join, I'm trying to get a bunch of people in. I have invited several people so far. I'm going to make some people admins to invite more people that they find are good and stuff. So if you want to join, just send me a private message in-game, send me a mail in-game, send me a Discord message with your account name in it. Basically, just contact me somewhere that's not the YouTube comments, because YouTube doesn't notify you for every comment anymore, so I have to actually go look at them. And I only do that every few days and then respond to them then. So anyways, thank you for watching or listening or whatever. I hope you enjoyed whatever I decided to put on the screen while I was talking. And I hope you gained at least something from this video, some takeaway, some understanding of my opinion maybe, some understanding of healing maybe, some, I don't know. I don't really care what you got out of it as long as you got something out of it, right? So I'm gonna leave now. Have a good day, weekend, dawn, dusk, or whatever time it is. Okay, bye.